Hi, this is Sam Hammond. I'm doing a Chapter 19 project assessment, and I'm just a high school senior, so if you're looking for something really concrete, this is not the place to be. Like I said, I'm doing an assessment, and we're going to go through this as quickly as possible. We're going over the First Amendment freedoms: religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. I just got a list of questions here, and then I answer them. So that's just what we're doing here. Okay, what is the difference between civil liberties and civil rights? How do we balance these? Civil liberties are protections against the government, including freedom of religion, press, speech, and fair trial. They guarantee safety of persons, opinions, and property from arbitrary acts of government. Okay, makes sense. Civil rights are those positive acts of government that seek to make constitutional guarantees a reality for all people. Examples are the prohibitions of discrimination on the basis of race or sex. What role do the Bill of Rights play in individual freedoms? The Bill of Rights protects our freedoms and restricts the power of the national government. That's pretty straightforward. What are the limits to individual freedoms? I think this is a good rule. We are free up to, but not over the extent of harming someone else. Plain and simple. What is the difference between the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause? Definitionally, Establishment Clause sets up a wall of separation between church and state. Free Exercise Clause, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. We're talking about schools here: public, private, parochial. Public schools are funded by public funds and abide by government and these clauses. So because they're part of the state, they deal with the state. Private schools are owned by individuals or businesses and do not abide by these. They don't have to do these things because they're not part of the state. And that's the same with parochial, which that word literally derives from parish. And these schools are associated with religion, and they're also privately owned. And in addition to that, they also have religious classes in addition to their normal general classes. Examples in U.S. Supreme Court cases that go along with these clauses are Epperson versus Arkansas, a case in which a state law forbid the teaching of evolution, ruled the state has no legitimate interest in protecting any or all religions from views distasteful to them. And County of Allegheny versus ACLU, a case in which a nativity scene was placed in prominent display on courthouse steps, while in the same state a Jewish Hanukkah scene was on display, but with a large Christmas tree, and I'm talking like a 40-foot large Christmas tree, beside it. The court ruled that the nativity scene was prohibited because it seemed to endorse governmental support for a certain religion or even religion in general, but the Jewish display was allowed only because it had secular items, i.e. the Christmas tree beside it, and had the nativity scene had secular items with it, it too would have been allowed. So it's all about this balance. It's all about the government not wanting to show that it has support or favoritizes one religion over another. Or even religion versus non-religion. So it's all about balance that you have to, if you're going to have a religious items, that you have to have secular items with that. Then it's okay in regards to having things on government property. So, what does the freedom of speech and press really mean? Definitions and court decisions defined: the right to speak without censorship or restraint by the government. And free press court decisions, you have People versus Harry Croswell, a case in which an author of a newspaper was tried for libel, slandering, against Thomas Jefferson. So it's pretty way back. The author was permitted his story on the basis of truth, that what he was saying was not a malicious intent, was based on facts. The case is critical for freedoms of the press. Garrison versus Louisiana, another case involving the press, in which it stated not only is truth allowed as a defense argument, but it is also allowed even if its actual intent is for malicious purposes. Basically, you can slander someone so long as it's true. Free speech court decisions, Schenck versus United States, states that free speech can be limited during wartime. I think with all amendments there are exceptions, especially when it comes to issues of national security. Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire states that fighting words are not protected under the First Amendment. Basically, any intentional derisive words or even annoying words said from one person to another, so long as it's on a public place like a sidewalk or like courthouse grounds or something, is illegal. Obscenity, prior restraint, which is censorship, motion pictures, radio and TV, symbolic speech. These are all things that we're going to be talking here. Censorship is still in existence, especially in businesses and corporations, mainly for preventing slandering, which could cause great harm to a business production. But in books, movies, radios, and TV, obscenity is allowed to a much greater extent than before. In Miller versus California, a three-part test was constructed to better identify what is obscenity. These are very broad terms. Number one, the average person finds that the work tends to excite lust. Number two, the work depicts or describes in an offensive way a form of sexual conduct specifically dealt with in anti-obscenity law. And number three, the work taken as a whole lacks serious, literary, artistic, and political or scientific value. Prior restraint defined is basically government's not allowed to place a restriction on something until it's happened. You can't restrain an idea until it's actually taken place. That is prior restraint. In motion pictures, in Mutual Film Corporation versus Ohio, which is like way back, right when videos were first coming out, the court stated that any film that was not of a moral, educational, or harmless and amusing character was prohibited. It went on to say that movie making was a business, pure and simple, and was not part of the press. Later in Burstyn versus Wilson, a court ruled the liberty of expression by means of motion pictures is guaranteed by the First and Amendment rights. And that was done like the 1940s or 50s, so that was really late in the game. I was surprised that it was that long before that one was passed. I'm surprised nothing happened before then, considering some of the movies out at that time. Radio and television. This is the most restricted method because it uses the public airwaves. Legally, that radio and television use public airwaves. The Supreme Court holds that it is the right of the viewers and listeners that is paramount over the broadcasters in this case. So radio and television are your two most restricted, most regulated areas of broadcasting. Symbolic speech. Basically, most symbolic actions are acceptable, such as union picketing, going on strikes, but things such as burning draft cards are not allowed. Who knew? How does the freedom of expression conflict with national security, and how do we deal with the conflict? Schenck versus U.S. 1919 stated that freedom of expression can hurt our national security. I'm sorry here, I lost my spot. Okay, this is a case in which a group of people were making flyers to encourage resistance to the draft. This is back in 1919, so World War I. This would affect our fighting force in war and therefore our national security directly. And I think, because it's asking my opinion here, that we should deal with the conflict on a case-by-case basis and limit protesters to only making opinions on issues of war. They may not incite resistance, but instead are only allowed to state their opinion, nor should they be allowed to send to the government unless it is true. Think of whistleblowers. And I was like, what in the world is whistleblowers? That's what this literally says. Think of whistleblowers. And I was so confused with this question. So I had to define what's a whistleblower. A person who informs that a person or organization engaged in illicit activity. I'm like, oh, a snitch. I get it now. Okay, got it. There are arguments for and against this. Arguments against whistleblowing cite confidentiality as the reason it would not be allowed. However, counterarguments cite the public health and the health of customers of the businesses being the ones that should be protected. And I was like, yeah, I'm thinking stock market, that definitely makes sense. However, in some cases, such as the press, confidentiality is a prevailing argument, as well as military and under certain circumstances of government that affect national security. So basically, national security is always number one because it deals with everybody. And press is like, hey, look, we can't be giving away our sources because that ruins our confidentiality. We can't tell somebody, oh yeah, this is confidential, and then the government's like, hey, who was that? And we give it away. So the press also gets a special freedom there. However, when it comes to national security, again, press has got to give it up. So how does the government provide freedom of petition and balance the freedom of assembly, speech of hate groups with protecting the public? U.S. Supreme Court cases. This is honestly the hardest question I ran into, and I didn't think it would be, but it was definitely hardest. So government allows freedom of petition, such as in the Meyer versus Grant case, which ruled that states could not bar groups from hiring individuals who circulate petitions in support of a ballot measure. Government allows freedom of assembly and speech even on hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan. However, it maintains public safety by keeping watch that any threats are kept from being acted upon. Basically, in a nutshell, this goes way back to what I was saying before. Our government protects, as a loose rule, anything the people say or do so long as it is not harming anyone else, their property, or infringing upon their own rights given them. This is like our whole purpose of government. I'm going to say it again. Our government protects anything the people say or do so long as it is not harming anyone else, their property, or infringing against their own rights given them. All right, that's all I've got for today. Thank you very much for tagging along with me, and that's all I got. Like I said before, I am just a high school senior doing an assignment. So, but if you did listen through all that, thank you much, and have a good one. Sam out.